Biker gang attacked a 75-year-old Marine veteran. But the town's quietest man had a different plan. 3 motorcycles roared into a West Texas truck stop. An old man in a faded military jacket stood up, asking them to keep it down. "You want to die early, old man," one shouted, then punched him square in the face. They didn't know. He once commanded a Marine Special Ops unit through 3 tours of duty. So what happened next? And why did the entire town have to pause all business? Join me as we explore a story that will make you stop and think. About 2 words: respect. At a small truck stop in Clay Hill, Texas, Frank Mallory, 75 years old, sat sipping coffee. He was traveling in his old RV on his annual journey to visit the military cemetery where 5 of his fellow soldiers rested. Frank had once commanded Bravo 3, a rapid response unit in Fallujah, Iraq. Though he'd left the military nearly 20 years ago, his posture and gaze still radiated discipline. 3 bikers wearing steel helmets and leather jackets emblazoned with black brakes entered, shattering the peaceful atmosphere. They slammed tables, kicked chairs, and demanded alcohol. When the young server refused, they began ransacking the place, laughing loudly, making a child at a nearby table cry. Frank stood up, spoke quietly. "There are children here. You gentlemen should show some decency. Who the hell are you to speak up?" The leader, Macklin, roared before punching him. Frank fell. His canvas bag spilled open. Inside were a silver star, a purple heart, and a black-and-white photograph of 6 young men. The second thug, Roach, stepped on the photograph. The server panicked. Customers fell silent. Frank quietly gathered everything up, blood trickling from his left cheek. But something else happened in that moment of silence. Something none of them expected. The youngest biker, barely 20, stared at the medals scattered on the floor. His grandfather had served, told him stories about honor, about sacrifice. For just a second, doubt flickered in his eyes, but Macklin grabbed him by the shoulder. "Come on, let's go. This old fool isn't worth our time." They revved their engines, laughed as they drove away. Frank remained seated, cleaning his wounds with a paper napkin. He didn't say another word, but everyone in that truck stop would remember what they saw: an old man who stood up when others stayed seated, who asked for decency when others chose silence. The server, Emily Flores, watched Frank carefully fold his photograph, place his medals back in the bag. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from something else entirely. She'd seen real courage, and it looked nothing like what she'd expected. Emily Flores had lost her father, a Marine, in Afghanistan. She quietly filmed Frank being assaulted with her phone, then posted it to a local veterans support group. "Does anyone know who this gentleman is? Please help," she wrote. Less than 3 hours later, the video spread through the veteran community across the state. A man named Samuel Doc Everett, who had served as a medic in Frank's unit, recognized him immediately. Sam called 2 other veterans: Miguel Torres, a high school teacher; Ron Eastman, who owned an auto repair shop. "Frank never asks for help, but we know he won't let this slide." All 3 decided to hit the road. They weren't calling for revenge. They wanted to send a message. But first, they made some calls to other veterans, to people who understood what those medals meant, what that photograph represented. Word spread quietly, through American Legion halls, VFW posts, veteran motorcycle clubs, not for violence, for something more powerful: understanding. Miguel had taught hundreds of kids about respect, about standing up for what's right. He'd seen bullies before. They all had the same weakness. They were cowards who only picked on people they thought couldn't fight back. Ron had fixed cars for veterans for 30 years. Many paid in stories instead of cash. Stories about brotherhood, about having each other's backs. Even decades later, Doc had saved lives in combat, held dying men in his arms, watched heroes take their last breaths. He knew what Frank represented, what those medals cost, what that photograph meant to someone who'd outlived his brothers. They drove through the night, not as young men seeking a fight, but as older men carrying a simple truth. Some things are worth standing up for. Some people deserve better. And sometimes, the quietest response carries the loudest message. They weren't going to hurt anyone. They were going to educate them. About respect, about consequence, about the fact that some old men aren't as helpless as they appear. 2 days later, at the Red Line bar on the outskirts of El Paso, Macklin and the Black Brakes were bragging about their conquest, unaware they were being watched. Sam, Miguel, and Ron entered like 3 ordinary customers. Miguel placed Frank's assault photo on Macklin's table. "You messed with the wrong person, son." Macklin laughed mockingly. "What are 3 old men gonna do? Call the cops?" Ron placed a small device on the table. A video of them assaulting Frank played silently. "Not the cops, but the community will know." Sam's voice was steady, calm. "That man saved my life and 4 others in Fallujah. You're just a kid who hasn't learned the word respect." The bikers reached for their knives, but Miguel held up a VMA card. Veterans Motorcycle Association. "You're now banned from every truck stop managed by veterans." Something shifted in the room. Other patrons were listening, some were nodding, others were pulling out their phones. Ron continued. "That photograph you stepped on? Those were his brothers. Dead brothers. You spit on their memory." The youngest biker, the one who'd hesitated at the truck stop, spoke quietly. I didn't know." "Exactly," Doc said. "You didn't know. You didn't ask. You just assumed. That's the problem with your generation. You think respect is something you take. It's something you earn." Macklin's bravado was cracking. The bar was getting quiet. Too quiet. Miguel leaned forward. "We're not here to fight you. We're here to teach you. About consequences. About community. About the fact that when you mess with one veteran, you mess with all of us." "That old man could have dropped all 3 of you without breaking a sweat," Ron added. "He chose not to. Because he's better than you are. Because he knows what real strength looks like." The bartender, an Army veteran himself, spoke up. "I think you boys should leave." Other customers were staring. Some had their phones out, recording. The Black Brakes retreated. No one got hurt. But the message was delivered, clear as day. As they walked out, the youngest biker turned back. Tell him I'm sorry." Sam nodded. "I will. But you tell him yourself. You know where to find him." The bar returned to normal conversation. But something had changed. A line had been drawn, a principle established. Some people are off limits. Some actions have consequences. Some communities take care of their own, even when those communities are made up of old men who've earned the right to be left alone. The video went viral. Over 3 million shares. News outlets picked it up. But Frank declined all interviews. He simply continued his journey to the cemetery, carrying flags and flowers. Emily received an email from a veterans organization. "Thank you for standing up when many wouldn't dare." They awarded her a scholarship to continue nursing school. The Clay Hill truck stop now had security cameras and a sign reading, "Protected by the veteran community." Many legitimate bikers came to apologize, left flowers outside the shop where Frank was assaulted. Those who knew Frank said he only replied, "I didn't do anything special. I just reminded them of what they forgot, that some people sacrificed so others could live in peace." But the story didn't end there. The video reached unexpected places. High schools used it in anti-bullying programs. Corporate diversity training included it as an example of standing up for others. A motorcycle club in California changed their name from Road Reapers to Road Guardians. They began escorting funeral processions for fallen veterans. Emily started a nonprofit, Silent Courage. It helped bystanders find their voice in moments of injustice. The youngest biker, whose name was Jake, drove back to Clay Hill 3 weeks later, alone. He found Frank at the cemetery, placing flags on graves. "Sir, I'm sorry." Frank looked up, studied the young man's face, saw something different. Remorse. Growth. "What's your name, son?" Jake Morrison." Frank nodded toward the headstone he was visiting. "This was Corporal Morrison, Tommy Morrison, from Dallas. Any relation?" Jake's eyes widened. That was my uncle, my mom's brother. He died before I was born." Frank was quiet for a long moment. Then he handed Jake a small flag. "He was a good Marine. Saved 3 men in a firefight. Never talked about it. Just did his job." Jake knelt beside his uncle's grave, placed the flag carefully. "I didn't know he was buried here." "Most people don't know the whole story," Frank said. "That's why we have to be careful. About assumptions, about actions, about the weight of our choices." They stood together in silence. 2 generations, connected by loss, by learning, by the possibility of becoming better than they were. Frank returned home after his trip, fixing old motorcycles in his garage as usual. One day, a young soldier came to get his bike repaired, his face bearing scars. "I know who you are," the young man said. Frank simply replied, "I'm a mechanic. Would you like some coffee?" They sat together, didn't say much, but their eyes understood each other. Every year, on that anniversary, someone leaves flowers, a flag, and a wooden sign at the truck stop reading, "Respect isn't something you ask for. It's something you keep by living worthy of it." Jake Morrison enlisted in the Marines 6 months later. He carried his uncle's photo through basic training, through deployment, through moments when he needed to remember what honor looked like. Emily became a registered nurse. She specialized in veteran care. Every difficult patient reminded her of Frank's quiet dignity under pressure. The Black Brakes Motorcycle Club disbanded. Macklin moved to another state. The third member, Roach, started attending AA meetings, found a sponsor who was a Vietnam veteran. Different paths, same lesson. Actions have consequences. Communities have memory. And sometimes the quietest people leave the loudest echoes. Frank never spoke publicly about that day, but he didn't need to. His response had been perfect. Not with fists, not with anger, but with the simple act of standing up, of refusing to be intimidated, of maintaining dignity when others lost theirs. That's what real strength looks like. Not the ability to hurt others, but the choice not to, even when you could, even when they deserve it. The truck stop still has that sign. Visitors often pause to read it. Some take pictures. Others just nod and move on. But they remember. And in remembering, they carry forward something important. The knowledge that respect is earned, that courage comes in many forms, and that sometimes the most powerful response is the quietest one. In a noisy world, sometimes the quietest people leave the biggest impact. Frank didn't speak up to regain honor. He acted to remind everyone that respect doesn't come from fists, but from how you live your life. We don't need to be heroes to protect what's right. We just need to refuse to bow to what's wrong. An old soldier may no longer carry a weapon, but his spirit remains the strongest barrier against evil's return. Courage isn't found in grand gestures. It lives in quiet persistence, day after day after day. If the moment the old man stood up in silence made your chest tighten, if you believe that sometimes respect doesn't need to be loud, just quietly unwavering, comment "respect" to remind the world of a value that seems simple, but is becoming rare. And if there's someone in your life who once protected others without saying a word, share this story with them.